Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Dude Therapist. I'm always really searching for men who are open, honest about their mental health. And we have a very special guest. We got Apolo Ohno here, one of the most winningest Winter Olympics U.S. athlete ever in the Hall of Fame 2019. Really someone who is not just an athlete, but a human being, and really in a documentary, Weight of the Gold, showed that beautiful side of what it means to be a human. So Apollo, thanks so much for coming on to the show.
Yeah, I'm so glad we could finally make it happen. I appreciate you reaching out so long ago, but it's awesome. I mean, all the things that you talk about, and communicate and kind of bring to light, I think is a really important part. I think as a society to kind of open up the chasm, so to speak, and really talk about these things in a more transparent detail.
Yeah, my first question really is nothing to do with mental health. Why high speed skating? Like, out of all things that you could have got into,
Why
figure
short track?
skating,
Yeah.
why short track? Why, like, what in your younger years pushed you that direction versus any other sport that you could possibly going to be in the Olympics?
Man, so I grew up in Seattle playing traditional stick and ball sports, um, football, basketball, baseball, track and field. I became a swimmer, was decent at swimming, and seen this sport of short track speed skating. Growing up in Seattle, it rains often, so if you can find some sort of indoor activity, that would be preferable. Um, and skating was one of those things. So I was already going to the roller skating rink every Friday and Saturday nights. My father had seen that I had a natural propensity to actually excel at the sport of speed skating. And that led him down the path of when we watched the Olympics together in 1992 and then again in 1994 of effectively saying, like, why don't you actually try this? I actually asked him if I could skate, but that was the process. It was like very simple. Like you can imagine, as many families watch Olympic Games together, then your son or your daughter says, I want to try that. The dad or the mom says, okay, let's see what that looks like in the next, I don't know, 4 to 6 months. And then your son or daughter excels at a very rapid rate to the point where he or she is being invited to the junior development training program in upstate New York in Lake Placid at the age of like 14 years old. And you as parents are like, oh, this is amazing, and then you decide to send your son or daughter there, and the rest is kind of history.
And that's and from a young age, it really starts from there. Are there any athletes? Now, this is not just that we're not going to talk about the Olympics still, because you have so many interviews about that. But is as an Olympic athlete, do people start always at a young age, like 6, 7, or does anyone start later on where they're more developed or more thought out about it versus like you're locked into the sport from such a young age?
It's pretty rare, I think, to see people at a much later age start to adapt to a sport, and a part of that's muscle memory, conditioning, body composition, and body chemistry in terms of how your body is adapted to a particular sport. Like speed skating, for example, is a very strange sport in terms of the body position. So biomechanically, the earlier that you can effectively begin speed skating, the more conditioned that you can become to make this unnatural movement feel somewhat normalized. But there's been a few instances. I would say for the most part, like most of my teammates started skating like 8, 9, 10 years old at
Hmm.
least, and then
And when you
some of them in the Midwest are like 3 years old, right? Like their parents gave them skates like before they got any other toys.
and you went out to Lake Placid with your family or by yourself?
No, my father stayed back in Seattle, and I was there in the Olympic Training Center as like a dorm room, junior Olympic speed skating hopeful. It was a very different path, right? So, for those listeners who have never been on Lake Placid, it's a beautiful place. It's amazing, but there's nothing there. Like you could run through the whole town in like 15 minutes, like literally jog through the
Wow.
whole town. On Main Street. There's like one bagel shop that I used to go to that I can remember back in the day. Other than that, there's just like the 1980 Olympic oval and hockey rink where the hockey team won gold, and then you've got where Eric Heiden shattered and became legendary in his own right of winning all distances in one Olympic Games. So that's like that was a very right is that process. So
Wow. So I want to talk about the mental health side because that's commitment from like 7,
Let
8
me know if
years
this is
old.
better. Yeah, sorry, I just reconnected.
You're good. I heard you. I
Okay.
heard you the entire time. Your video was a little choppy, but I heard you, so it's all good.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool.
And I'll listen to it again to make sure, and I'll cut and paste the parts that are like choppy. Like at a young age, you're really committing to something, and it takes 2 a days, 3 a days. You're working different things. You're mentally, physically. How do you stay to that? I understand as an adult committing to something like that, right? If I want a diet, go to the gym 3 to 4 times a week. As an adult, I can commit to that. I understand what that means. At 14, how do you conceptualize that? How does it make sense to be all in on something so big and so like maybe end up playing in the Olympics? How do you do that? How does that happen?
I mean, number one, incredible mentorship and coaches, right? They're there to console you, guide you, give you those guardrails in which to operate within so that they can showcase the greatest potential reservoir, the greatest reservoir potential that you have. And they help you tap into that so you can build your own confidence. That's where the coaches come in. On the other side, a lot of this is just, it comes naturally to these kids that come to these early stage. They're just playing, right? They're having fun. They're in the moment. They're being present. They're having joy. And I think as they grow older in sport, as we've seen many times, many iterations that go by, the athlete starts to experience scars and loss and pressure and ancillary elements of the sport that are outside their control and stress and all these elements. And that's when the game starts to slightly change. It's no longer done purely for the joy of the game, and rather it's done in pursuit of those results that people are after, me included.
Yeah,
But also
for
the
sure.
commercialization of the games, right? Is basically the business of the Olympics is to churn more medals. That is the business model.
And I know when we first started talking, I reached out to you because of that documentary, Weight of Gold,
Mm-hmm.
which really I found it so beautiful that it touched upon different sports and different genders, and even I think one or two people who have actually committed suicide, um, either since or during that filming or since their time in the Olympics, and the pressure of that focus of the end result, which is a medal. And I remember I'm not sure if it was you who made the distinction of what it is between gold and bronze, and someone like clapped
Yeah.
very quickly, and that's the moment when I realized, oh God, I got to reach out to I got to reach out to these people, ask them how that is to put your whole heart and life and dedication and blood, sweat, and tears, literally, to maybe not winning by that much, and then starting all over again and doing it again. How is that shift of getting locked in, getting zoned in, working 4 years to that, and maybe not performing, and you could be at your best and still not be good enough? How do you go through that in your mind?
In short track speed skating, it's a master class on stoicism. So while we all expect and want and feel that we deserve to be on the podium, the reality is there's only three spots on the podium. And there's thousands of athletes that try to make an Olympic team and then go and try to win an Olympic medal, and they don't get that. So I think it's par for course. I think there's an understanding, and that's why there's this level of dedication and commitment, and also ancillary pressure that goes outside the internal mechanism of desire to want to be your best. But also, there's the outside, right? Of how do you represent yourself as an American? How do you go and compete and bring home gold? And then how do you make sure that you can show up your absolute best? And so the pressure is there. I don't think that most athletes actually think about that when they're training, right? When you're 3 years out from a games, right? If this was 2018 or 2019, um, you feel like you have a long time to go before the Olympic Games are actually here. And then at the snap of a finger, they're here. And you look back and you're like, wait, have I actually done every single thing in my power to be the best version of myself?
Hmm.
And a lot of times you say no, because you're like, no, I was kind of lazy. Maybe I wasn't dedicated enough. Maybe I didn't focus enough on recovery. I mean, there's all, the thousand different kind of self-critical elements you can happen inside your own head. And I think the most important part that I've seen athletes go through is just remaining committed to the path and realizing first and foremost that when you're there in Olympic Games, and by the way, this is what would always happen to me, is I would get to Olympic Games, and then we were there about 2 weeks or maybe sometimes 3 weeks before the games actually begin, before my first race. We acclimate, we get used to the environment, if there's altitude, the ice conditions, the Olympic Village, the food, everything, right? The bed, like you just want to kind of acclimate and get used to your environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always remember thinking like the first 2 weeks that I was there was every Olympic Games I've ever been to. In the back of my head, there was this voice that always says, "Man, don't you wish you had another month of training left? Like you would be more prepared. You would be, you could perfect your technique. You could get your equipment better, um, whatever that is, right? Like, oh, we noticed something about your technique that's like off that you can't change in the next 2 weeks. Oh, I wish I would have spent more time in the weight room." So there's all these voices inside that tell you that you're not ready, that you're not good enough, and that it's just maybe someone else's game. And so, the best athletes in the world don't listen to that voice. They probably have that conversation. They choose not to give that voice a vote in any capacity. As we were talking about before, when you first reached out, the weight of gold and kind of this phenomena around how athletes in general are being much more open and conversational around their kind of innermost sacred feelings and emotions around how they're actually coping in either life, sport, relationship, psychologically, whatever that might be. And they're being much more open around having that communication, which is an amazing avenue to see that happen. Um, the weight of gold, for those of you who haven't seen it, it really is, it kind of rips back the curtain on what the process is like for many athletes up until recent, in pursuit of their Olympic dream of making an Olympic team, making an Olympic a podium, and winning a medal. And then what is the other cost? What is the consequence as the seesaw, right? Like everything is not always so balanced, right? As it can't be, right? When you're that obsessed around making the most incremental of performance improvements every day for years, and then that incremental performance improvement equates to 200ths of a second, which is like this much difference, right? After a 4-year journey, you can see why this almost like psychotic approach towards the training and reliance upon results in order to give you the fulfillment of you're good enough. You get the head nod of approval from your coaches, from your parents, from your teammates, from the fans. And it's this kind of interesting cycle that occurs. I'm not saying it's good, bad, or ugly. I think that's just that I'm stating facts, right? These are
Mm-hmm.
what they are. And so what this documentary did was talk about how for the longest of time in sport, particularly US Olympic team, particularly didn't have a lot of resource or even time and energy spent on trying to unearth what these conversations were. Because in essence, the model, and again, no one would ever say this, but like to put it in the most blunt way, your job as an Olympic athlete is to go and win,
Yeah.
to go and perform. Your job is not to talk about how you feel. Your job is to, no matter how you feel, you shield that and instead become this mentally tough warrior that can always perform regardless of any situation, circumstance, or obstacle that is in your way. And there's something beautiful about that.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, a lot of times athletes are actually really not okay, to the point where, as you mentioned, there's significant depressive behavior and action that's occurring. I won't say the person's name, but one of my roommates many years ago, I remember he didn't leave his room for 3.5 days, and I just thought he was sick.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a combination of like, people who get sick or they feel depressed. It's kind of the same, right? They can't get out of bed. They
Mm-hmm.
have no energy. There's no desire. All your hormonal kind of signals are flatlined, and they're lower than they should be. And then there's this like paralyzing force that just keeps that person down. And so I think what the common misconception was for so many years was that Olympic athletes were immune to this, when in reality they're not. They're just like everybody else, and they have the same conversations between their two ears like everybody else. Some of us are able to mute those conversations, or at least disregard those voices that tell us that we're less than, and instead listen to the voice that says, well, what could go right versus everything's going wrong. And so that's what this entire documentary was about like just bringing to light the real weight of gold, what actually occurs, what kind of sacrifices were made. And unfortunately, there have been athletes that have taken their own life,
Yeah.
because they were not healthy psychologically.
Yeah. And I think that's what shook America recently with Simone Biles, right? stepping away and saying, I'm not okay. And even times with Michael Phelps or even other athletes that are such in the limelight of American society and the world stage of the Olympics saying, I can't do this anymore, or I'm not okay, or not performing well enough, or whatever you want to call it, the yips or whatever dizzies, whatever thing Simone Biles had. And it really brings you into like a state of understanding that they're not this perfection of human beings. They're amazing athletes. Athletes have to be very good at what they do, but they're human athletes first. And I remember sitting here as a therapist, all the chit chat on Facebook, social media as a therapist, the therapists posting about it, talking about it, go Simone Biles, go Simone Biles. And we're all just talking about it and saying the same thing like, wow, I can't believe an Olympic athlete is doing this, because we have looked at Olympic athletes as the gold standard of perfection. That if you get there, something must be, you are amazing. How and I'm sure that's something that you hear or you realize with all the noise going on around you. How in that moment do you get in the zone to perform with all the things going on in your head, all the things around you, the pressure of the moment? Let's talk about your first time being in the Olympics, not even just the other times that you've won, but that first time how do you just lock in as a person, as a human being, and as an athlete?
Part of being able to get into that zone is a lot to do with conditioning. It's got a lot to do with just repetition and your ability to, I think, time and time again, just go back to your routine, your structure, your discipline, your mechanics of how you can put yourself in the best possible position. So a lot of athletes are actually quite superstitious, I would say. They would never admit this, but when you do something of a routine that is so anal retentive to its exact second, food, stretching, the way you tie your skates, left foot first, right foot second, left glove on first, right glove on second, the way you tie your helmet, like all these weird quirks that happen. And when one of those, if I tie my right skate first versus my left skate, I got to take everything off and then put everything back on again. Like there's no real like fundamental difference here, right? It's all the same. But we get very addicted to these routines because we believe the routine is the shortcut or the consistency of habit to create being in that flow state and that optimal state of performing at our highest level. And so all of the mechanisms of control that you could possibly imagine throughout your day that you could replicate every day for years to
Mm-hmm.
do identical, the same thing every time, to then eliminate the volatile nature of what those things do to take you out of that flow state. Just think about that. There's thousands of variables every single day. That's what I spent 15 years doing, was removing all of the volatility associated with what was going to happen going into the games. So to give you an example, my environment where I lived in Salt Lake City pre my final Olympic Games in 2010 in Vancouver, I had a friend basically take all of the things from my room in my house in Salt Lake City, my dresser, my bed, my pillows, my sheets, everything, and drive it to Vancouver, BC. And then we
Mm-hmm.
had a house that was like 5 minutes away from the arena. In the room, I put everything there. I made sure there was a sauna, everything. And it was, I mean, it's a blessing, right? To be able to have the access to do that. So you become very addicted to those things. And then, every athlete also has this conversation. I mean, I did, especially in my first games, around like this overwhelming external pressure that had never felt like it was there before. And I had won world championships and world cups, and I had shattered world record. I had done everything. This race mechanically is identical to what was before. The
Mm-hmm.
time that we live in this universe is always the same. It's not changing, right? It's always here. Um, and the race distance is always the same. The athletes are not different. We're putting this one particular event on a pedestal because we believe this is the once every 4 year event, right? And that's where we're going to celebrate this one more than we did the one that was 3 months ago.
Yeah.
But it's all kind of, it's amazing and it's silly at the same time. And so a lot of these external pressures are very, very overwhelming. I remember my very first race in my very first Olympics in Salt Lake City. This is 20 years ago. Okay. It was the men's 1,000 meters quarterfinal. It was me and four athletes, but one of them dropped out. So it was just me and two other athletes. All I had to do was finish in the top two positions in order to qualify and make it to the next round, which would be the semifinal. Do that again, and then you make the final. Okay. Very simple 9 lap race, a minute and a half long. The first half of the race is just like lollygagging and just jostling for position. One of the athletes was a good friend of mine from Germany. Arya Nakbar was his name, and he did, he wasn't in the running. He wasn't a medal contender. The other athlete was the reigning Olympic champion from South Korea. And I remember getting on the ice and then looking out into the stands in Salt Lake City, only a mere like 7 months after, September 11th, 2001 had occurred. So people were very, very distraught, and there was chaos and people were just unsure of their safe environment. And I remember people put these like pieces of electrical tape on their chin because I used to have this little goatee when I was younger, and they were chanting my name.
Yeah.
And so like I'm like this 19-year-old kid going on 15, and I'd never felt this before. I had been in different countries and people chanted my name because there was fans and such, but nothing that was deafening like this, and definitely not 20,000 fans that were in that arena who were cheering for me, and before the race begins, the judge blows the whistle. Quiet. Everyone quiets, right? Silence, please. The whole place gets quiet. And then I hear this guy who's like up in this like I don't know. He's like a not like a heckler, but he's like coming down. He's got like his drink and his like food. And he goes, "Bring home the gold, Apollo!" Right? And it's like, holy shit! Right? I'm like, and my heart rate had like jumped like 40 beats. The race hadn't started yet. We were just on the start line. And I remember like just thinking, after people cheering my name and all these things happened, I had to like crouch down and like look at my skate laces, like I was in a squat position, and just like basically go into this tunnel because all of the external stimuli was so overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And what was funny was that this wasn't a difficult race. The strategy was very simple. But I was like, I could have very easily cracked in that moment and like false started or like made a bad move on one of the athletes and got disqualified. Any number of things that could happen. So that happens often in the sport, right? We see weird results of previous athletes who were spectacular aren't able to rise to even their lowest barometer
Mm-hmm.
of potential because of the external pressure that they allow to dictate their emotional state. And that was the first time, by the way, I had been preparing for this moment for years. I used to listen to previous Olympic Games starting to try to replicate what that emotional, and it was nothing like that. No,
Wow.
I couldn't even come close. It was totally different. Seeing people, them looking me in the eye,
Yeah.
right? It was just it was a very powerful moment, and I couldn't prepare for myself. And so the only thing I knew how to do was to focus back on my breathing. That was the tactic that I used to get into the zone,
Mm-hmm.
to prepare before the race. And it also was that calming, central, centering kind of component that I used just to say, okay, here and now, breathe and relax. This race is no different than anything else. You know what to do. You have raced this tens of thousands of times in your head, millions of times.
Yeah.
This is muscle memory.
It's
And then
amazing.
just and then breathe. Yeah.
And it's funny, as a fan, we watch athletes. I remember like talking about your little patterns and things and what you ate. There was a baseball player on the Boston Red Sox. I'm a massive Yankee fan, so Boston Red Sox. Nomar Garciaparra, his name was, and he used to do this weird thing with his gloves between every at bat. And I would sit there and
Yeah.
go like, "What's wrong with this guy? What's he doing?"
Yeah.
It's just this muscle memory of I'm back in the zone. I'm getting in the box. Or Bernie Williams used to do like a weird like thing with his bat. Everyone, I'm a baseball fan, but as a fan, we see athletes perform, and they don't perform to our expectation, and we go, "Oh my God, they suck." But it's so funny because we could never exist in their world of performance, and we think we know as fans what the hell we're talking about. Oh, they should have bent this way. They should have, sped up. Michael Phelps should have, gone faster. Why did he go slower? Simone Biles should have twisted. Apollo should have, done the curve a little. Like we think we know what we're talking about. I think when you start, now I'm not here to age you a lot at all. You look like you're like 20, but when you started,
Definitely not really.
social media
Yeah,
wasn't as big. Do you think the mental health side of being an Olympic athlete has shifted now that anyone and everyone has access to every video of you recording, can comment, has an opinion, or feels they have an opinion? Does that pressure, like, how do you
of
quiet, like,
course.
how do you deal with that in the world of today, where you can get DMs, hate, whatever it is? It's such a different time.
It's a very different time. And I'm very grateful to have kind of experienced both. In the beginning of my career, there was like no social, right? Didn't really exist. And then at the tail end of my career, there was the kind of advent, like the starting beginnings in 2010 of social, what it is today, 12 years ago. I would say that the athletes definitely have an added layer of pressure. There's also an added layer of expectation, right? So they have to now, and by the way, with that comes an incredible opportunity. They then can market themselves, commercialize themselves. They
Oh
have
yeah,
access to brands and sponsors in ways that we could never even dream of. And so there's
yeah,
this massive untapped ability to really actually make a great living as an Olympic athlete, regardless of your skill level, if you're just good at social. As we've seen, right? You don't have to really have any skills as long as you're good at social. That is
yeah.
the skill. Um, and so I think now athletes, they want the sponsors, they want to be able to provide for themselves, but they also want to perform. Now they're also being expected to act or react in a certain way. And now everyone, and I would say that this goes across the entire country. I would say sports has truly changed, especially in the Olympic space. And so the data that we see is the amount of people, young people, who are watching the sports is perhaps at an all-time low. And they're having a very difficult time identifying with, why do I need to care about this? How is this important to me? Um, and it's just like someone who maybe is a film buff, right? And says like, oh, you have to watch this Scorsese film, or you won't go watch De Niro, or Brando, and just watch this like moment. These kids don't know who these people are.
Yeah.
They want to watch the person that's on TikTok and on YouTube that they can relate to, that's of similar age. That's who is important to them.
Yeah.
And so whether we agree with that or not doesn't really matter. So the Olympic space is changing, where you see athletes doing things that I know are a very far stretch of their own personality in order to try to
Hmm.
satisfy what the consumption of media has become. And it's very hard to stand out in media because it's so noisy. So you have to be extreme in some view. You have to, I'm not saying you have to, but like the
It helps.
likelihood of you being recognized, being someone who's kind of a muted voice, is very low. It's
Yeah.
very low. So if you take a very strong opinionated stance, or you're doing something that others would classify as crazy, the likelihood is you're going to stand out. And so what's that doing? It's perpetrating, and it's basically signaling to people to say, like, you have to be extreme in
Mm-hmm.
every essence of what that is.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, there's definitely added pressure there. I know a lot of athletes who love social media. I know a lot of athletes who despise using social because they feel like they can't be present, right? I can only imagine. Like, I didn't have to worry about always posting and tweeting in the early stages of my career. Like,
You
all I
just
had
had
to
to
do was just,
practice.
I was present. I was fully present. And if you remember, people have, like older folks, like people who are older than us, and then people who are our age. There's individuals who remember a concert, they remember a sports game where you didn't have your phone,
Mm-hmm.
you were just there experiencing. And then, psychologically speaking, you're actually basically creating these incredible memory banks of experiential moments in time where time slowed down.
Yeah.
And as you age, you revert back to that time because it's so fresh. It was such a either shocking moment in your time by loss, fear, pain, or it was so incredible because you were there live. And I feel like in 2002, that experience was like that for a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
right? Post 9/11, they really watched it. And then today, you watch it, like we're about to watch the Olympic Games in Beijing, right? It's about to start here next couple of weeks. And a month after the games, people are no longer talking about the games. A week after the games, sometimes a couple of days after the games, they're already moving on to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've seen the attention span go from 27 seconds down to 21. And I think
Yeah.
now it's like 7.5 seconds is the average
Yeah.
attention span. I mean, that's a little crazy, right?
Yeah, it
Seven and a half
is.
seconds. So like, I feel like the lowest hanging fruit for all of us operating in our own paths is to do the deepest of works and remaining completely committed in this environment. So,
It's just so funny because I remember vividly when I was younger going to Yankee games with my father as our memory where we had no distraction.
mm,
And as a kid with ADHD, it was like torture. But I remember vividly every smell, sound, experience watching Derek Jeter flip the ball to Jorge Posada when they won against the A's. Like, just, I remember every moment. And people still talk about the 1980 Olympics, the Winter Olympics, the hockey, like the USA versus Russia as it was yesterday. Like, people, but no one's talking about, like, no offense, but people aren't talking about Apollo Ohno's winning of a race or Michael Phelps. Like, it's just not as common anymore because there's another thing happening in 5 seconds or in 3 days and
mhm.
the last couple of questions that I have, because I can ask you a billion questions because I really admire your career. I love just the idea of just commitment to something and really putting your all into something and kind of quieting noise or putting aside, even sacrificing other things in life because you have a goal in mind. That takes a lot of hardship and really courage. So if you lose, now I'm sure you've lost. I know you've
Many
won
times.
plenty of times, you've won a lot. Um, how was that first win, like the high, and how did you deal with that first real loss in an Olympic? How do you bounce? How do you not let the high get ahead of you and build your ego? Like, I am a gold medalist. Look at me roar. Sponsorships, calling, interviews, everyone reaching out to you. And then the low where you feel that all the work that you've done is for nothing because of that split second. And then you have to pick back up. How do you balance those two?
It's super hard, man. I mean, when you're signaled to the world that you should feel entitled and that everything that you're being given is you earned it, you start to believe it. And then
Mm-hmm.
when it doesn't go your way and that phone stops to ring, you're like, hey, what the hell? You guys told me that I was this thing,
Yeah.
you know? And they forgot to tell you, like, hey man, like you're not happening anymore. Like there's another like 20 kids that are like way more interesting or better than you, right? So, and the flip side is on the losing side, I think that it was excruciating. That was the real psychological pain for me, is when I actually would fall short of what I believe to be my real potential. It kept me up at night in a way that was very toxic. And I really listened to that voice, and I used to replay them as like nightmares, right? These races over and over and over
Mm-hmm.
again. Why didn't you move? Why did you hesitate? You're so stupid. Why are you so weak?
Mm.
You're never going to be who you say that you want to be in this sport or in this career path. Um, and the same thing goes for like when you retire as an athlete, right? Like, what's next? What are you good at? What are you passionate about? What are you hungry for? What skill sets do you think that you have developed that are transferable to the next career? You may be like 30 years old, but you actually have
Yeah.
like zero work experience. Literally,
Yeah.
your work experience is that of which is on the ice hockey rink.
Yeah.
And so you're starting from scratch. And I think that conversation is, how do we, instead of focusing on the things that I don't have, utilize the tremendous life skills that have been developed throughout sport in a way that will help us transcend beyond what our own internal disbelief will be about
Mm-hmm.
ourselves? And it's really all about, which voice do you want to listen to? Do
Mm-hmm.
you want to listen to that voice that tells you that you can't? And by the way, the more you listen to it, the more it starts to become very real,
Yeah.
over and over. I don't know why I believe this, but I feel like the cellular system is always listening. And the more negativity you place upon that, the more that eventually will break down. Your body won't respond. And by the way, we all respond different ways, right? Some people respond very well to negative criticism. Other people need the kind of positive attributes and uplifting. But on that side was, I had to be able to reset. And so part of that resetting is surrendering to the outcome. The race happened. I can no longer change that race. The result is what it is. Even if it was unfair, it doesn't matter. I can't
Mm-hmm.
change that outcome. I can only learn from it. I can yearn the greatest insights and then reset my mind, pour the cup of water back out of information, and then begin as if it never happened. Now, speed skating and short track speed skating, particularly, is an incredible life lesson in stoicism, because there's so many thousands of variables of change that could detract you away from what you believe that you deserve to have, and you
Mm-hmm.
don't get it. And so often, very often, we are faced with these weird situations where we can't control the outcome, and I have to only be able to focus on what I can control. So that
Mm-hmm.
kind of Marcus Aurelius,
Mm-hmm.
letters of a Stoic, and all these different types of philosophical writings in the past have been really, really kind of well practiced in short track. And we had a saying in short track, something happens where you're the world champion and someone falls down in front of you, or you're a blade problem. You say
Mm-hmm.
that's short track. And it's easy to say, but like it's very hard to feel that. And so in life, when I retired in 2010 and started to on my own career path, that was a really great life lesson. Was like, I want to micromanage everything, but I can't control all the outcomes. And so whatever the result actually may be, I have to accept it as such. And then I take with me, even if I'm disappointed in that fire, and I apply it towards the next try, the next path, the next career. I think that's really important for people to realize, is that the chapter doesn't stop here. In the moment, you feel like this is such a defining component, but it's not. It's one chapter in your life, and it's an important chapter, and maybe the result is supposed to be this way. You just don't know it yet.
Yeah, and you're actually talking about, there's a lot of research behind what you're saying, not just from Marcus Aurelius and the beautiful works of Stoicism, which is such a beautiful piece of writing and such amazing thought process. I highly suggest people reading and looking into that. I know the author Ryan Holiday is very into writing about stuff like that. Beautiful, beautiful books. But if you look at the therapy model, ACT or ACT, it's very much of acceptance of this is what is the reality, and now what do I do going forward? And what you're talking about, that cellular level, there's so much research on the idea of the more negative you think, the more it actually rewires your brain. Literally creates new pathways within your structure of your brain that now you actually believe that as fact because now your brain wires and shoots that way. So it impacts every part of who you are. And it's not this fluffy, lovey-dovey, the more you think, the more you like manifesting. It's science. There's research of MRIs and CAT scans of people's bodies shifting within a thought process. So I love that you said that. I was going to ask you about the retirement part because most Olympic athletes end at like 30, 35. Do you guys have like a secret WhatsApp, like you, Sean White, and all these cool people? Like, hey, what are you doing? After you're done, it's like,
No,
you know,
oh man,
but
I
like,
wish. Um,
like all like the Game of Thrones and like Harry Potter, they all have like WhatsApp groups of all the guys, all the people. How do you make that shift then? Because I know you wrote a beautiful book, right? The Pivot,
yeah,
right? The Next Pivot.
hard pivot.
Hard Pivot. Sorry about that.
Yep.
Hard Pivot. That's a beautiful piece of work that takes a lot of effort and time to write a book. But how do you then go from all you're doing is that preparation and commitment to a sport, and then now not having that sport, not that it doesn't exist anymore, that you didn't have an amazing experience, it wasn't unbelievable for your life, but you're in your 30s and most people are still in their career. How do you then take a step back? Do you take a break? Do you take a moment to recollect? Or do you just jump right into something else? How do you find that as athletes?
I jumped into something right away. I just went sprinting off into every direction. I said yes to everything. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just was deeply afraid of failure, and I
Mm-hmm.
did definitely did. I definitely did want. I wanted to find something that would satisfy me as much as the short track and the Olympic path gave. It's really hard. I wrote that book because this like struggle of identity and transference of one to the next, the reinvention process is difficult and challenging, and then change is critical, but it's really hard. And human behavior is critical to change, but it's also really, really tough. And so I just talk about in this book around my own experiences, some of the tactical toolkit that I've used in a very simplistic way. It's a very easy read in a way that says, like, hey, look, we all carry with us these micro traumas and instances throughout life that
Mm-hmm.
chip on a shoulder, angry, defensive, whatever that might be, insecure. Like these are all components of your upbringing and your conditioning, but you don't have to remain handcuffed to what was. That's the most important thing in the book, because I want to remind people that you have the choice of deciding how you want to perceive what to do next,
Mm-hmm.
right? How do you perceive this particular problem into challenge, then into opportunity? That's like a really important part of how we go through life. And um, I forgot the name of this quote. It's in one of the chapters, but it talks about like um, to be thrown out of the nest routinely is to be fully alive. right? And
Mm.
so we don't know that until we're constantly being forced into these uncomfortable states, which then give us the opportunity to grow where we can overcome those uncomfortable states and they become normalized. And we realize that, you're wearing a rogue shirt, right? So like in CrossFit, for example, like the first time you ever do like an incredibly challenging workout, by the 50th time or by the fifth time you've done that, it's still just as hard, but you can get through it and you can accept it. And now you're almost ready embracing, even if you hate it, right?
Yeah.
It's a big change. Like when you first do something that's like so like, I don't know, we used to do this thing back when I was like doing some CrossFit stuff like 10 years ago when I first retired. We used to do this thing called the deck of cards. I don't know if you did this. So basically, take a deck of cards, every face card, every number, or sorry, every club is like push-ups, like something is
There's
squats, something is
burpees.
deadlifts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so whatever that is, like face cards 10, right?
Yeah. Like 10 of
Um,
them. Yeah.
yeah, 9, 8, 7. The first time I did that, I was destroyed, like completely destroyed. By the time I did it for like the ninth time, I actually was looking forward to it and I could accept it. And I just remember I could do so many more. Anyway, your body will adapt. That's what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say. And in the moment, it feels like you can't. This is too much. You will always have those feelings, but the human body and mind is so resilient. It's so adaptable, and I'm like living proof of that. And many, many other people are. And so I just wanted to I wanted to show people not my path of what works for me and saying this is your path too, but
Hmm.
saying like, hey, there's alternative paths here that perhaps you haven't looked down. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. The work is always going to be the shortcut. Okay. Um, Change is hard. You need to embrace it. And if you can embrace it, then your life will move in a way that you've never experienced before.
I love. I didn't even realize I was wearing a Rogue T-shirt. But my sister-in-law's like, "Don't talk about CrossFit," because CrossFitters talk about CrossFit. But you're right. The first time I did CrossFit, I thought I was dying. I
Yep.
legitimately was like, "I think I'm dying,"
And you were.
and I was.
And
My
you
body
probably
was
were
on
dying too.
fire. My lungs were on fire. But now it's that I've accepted that this is the reality of what I chose to work out as, and that it's gonna suck, but I'm going to get through it, even though I know it's going to suck. And there's a huge part of that. And I don't want to take up all your time because I would just really want to thank you for being so open and honest with your mental health, with the documentary and everything that you're putting out there.
Yeah.
Because as a man who has feelings, who is an emotional person, who's very vulnerable and open on social media, seeing a man of your stature, whether you agree with the stature or not, or you accept it depending on the day, but as being a gold medalist winner, someone who has that voice and that platform, it is an honor to be able to talk to you, to have someone like you in the world saying, "Hey, I'm a human. I have feelings. This has happened," and put it out there for a documentary that could be there forever, and put a book together and helping people see that is, I think, to me, unbelievable. So I really thank you for all the amazing work you do, and I'm so honored you said yes, because to connect to people like you is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
It's
It's why
awesome.
I'm a therapist. So really, thank you so much, and everyone should check out the documentary. I'm gonna buy a lucky listener Apollo's book because I think it's super important to spread his
Thank you.
truth and his unbelievable knowledge. And really, I wish you all the best of luck in everything you're doing. And really, I hope everything goes well for you in the future.
Thank you, man. Likewise. I appreciate the time. Thank you.